Oh well. Now we've had the late arrivals, I think we can start. It's always good for you to join us, Councillor Franks.
Thanks. Clive hasn't sat down yet.
No. Are you ready, Clive?
Nearly.
I make it 6 o'clock. What about you, Marcus?
Yeah, dead on.
Dead on? Okay. Okay, prior to the planning committee, can I welcome everybody here tonight, and hope you had a good Christmas and a happy new year. Can I remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the internet, and the recording then is archived for future viewing. Okay, so that being said, everybody knows that we're live on the video link. First of all, could I take apologies for absence?
Yeah,
Councillor Mark Wilson.
Yeah, Councillor Wiaron Birch, please.
Thank you. And I think otherwise we're a full committee, aren't we? Okay, well done. Can somebody move and second the minutes of the last meeting? Second? Yeah, I think the planning officer wants to refer something about what you raised at the last planning committee in them minutes, Jonathan. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just to refer members to page 6, you'll recall there was some discussion last month about the planning obligations and affordable housing SPGs. That matter was referred back to Cabinet in accordance with committee's resolution. Cabinet noted the comments of the planning committee, and those have now been progressed. It was subject to a separate call-in procedure through scrutiny. That has been resolved, and so those matters are now material considerations in development management decisions moving forward. Just for information, members may note that on the table in front of you, you've got a table of what was requested and discussed at the last planning committee in terms of what other planning authorities are doing in respect to the affordable housing thresholds and quantities. So that's just for members' information. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So that being said, moved and seconded. All in favour? Yes, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item is to receive declarations of interest under the Members' Code of Conduct. I think Councillor Bob Penrose first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, agenda item 9, a planning application 2015/00852, Home Farm. I am known to the applicant, although I do believe it's withdrawn, but I'll declare the interest anyway.
Yeah, I think similarly I'll declare the same interest in that matter, but it is withdrawn, so there's no need for any member to leave the room. Councillor Parker. Ditto?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I have withdrawn the planning application, so I'll remain.
Thank you. Are there any other members who want to declare any interest in the committee papers that's before us tonight? No? Okay then. Move on swiftly to agenda item 4, which is the site inspections. Anything to add, Marcus?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. All noted?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Agenda item 5 is building regulation applications and building control matters which have been determined by the Director under his delegated powers. That's on page 1. Members move to note? Okay, thank you. Sorry?
Only just to point out that there are 3,000 applications in here for the new build residential unit, so the Assembly, by putting in the fire protection measures, have resolved the housing situation in the Vale with 3,016.
Well, the ASI applications, I'll ask Marcus to explain what they are, because people reading that will think we've had all these houses applications put in. I think it's something to do with the Welsh Assembly government ministers or the Assembly's water, something to do with the water sprinkler systems. But Marcus can answer that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you will notice quite a number of housing references to new build residential in that list of approved inspector submissions. In fact, there is a mistake. Your calculations are very good. But actually, it says 500 new build residential. If you look at the form that was submitted, it was 5,000 new build residential. The what has happened is that you may or may not be aware, Welsh Government has to change the rules in terms of building regulations, and now all new build residential properties have to have a fire suppressant system built in from 1st of January this year. That could include sprinkler or possibly gas systems, more likely to be sprinkler. That has led to a flurry of house builders looking at their sites that they have in their land bank. They have no planning permission. They've never spoken to us about it, but they're sites that they have options on or in their land banks, and they have just put these applications for approved inspectors in on those sites to protect their position, so that if they ever did get planning permission, they wouldn't have to put sprinklers in the houses. So it is a financial decision they've taken to submit a huge load of these applications to protect their positions. It doesn't mean there's any sort of consent in terms of planning or in terms of the use of the land. It is purely a technical exercise to try and avoid the new requirements of Welsh Government.
Yeah. Does that explain for you as well, Councillor Hacker?
That's quite right. Yes, I was preempted on my question, but thank you very much for the explanation. I think it was very necessary because people have the wrong impression from this.
Okay, thank you for that. Members happy we move that on the agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So we're on agenda item 6, planning applications determined by the director and his delegated powers, on page 5. Anything to add, Marcus?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Move we note?
Yeah.
All happy? Thank you. 7, anything on appeals on agenda item 15, Marcus?
No, nothing to add, Chair. Just to obviously note again the combined total of 85% success rated appeals, which is obviously pleasing as we're going into a new year.
Okay, 85% is quite high. Well done, Marcus. Move we note?
Yeah.
Thank you. 8, trees, little I, under the delegated list, which is on page 18. Anything to add there, Marcus?
Nothing to add there, Chair.
Thank you. I think you will have on the second one, which is to confirm the tree preservation order on page 19. I think you might want to tell us a bit about that.
Just to explain the background to this, following some works done to trees that were protected by condition, which members will recall is on this site approved almost 2 years ago now in Wenvo and being developed by Red Row Homes, there was concerns that trees which were supposed to be retained, were actually being subject to work. Subsequently, there was also an amended application put in, which instead of keeping the trees within a managed woodland area, was placing the trees within the gardens of the properties. So, in order to ensure that those trees would be retained, they are deemed to be important trees, not least in terms of the protection they give to existing residents, but also in terms of obviously street scene and street picture. We did serve a tree preservation order on a group tree preservation order on the group of trees concerned. The order was subject to consultation obviously with the landowner, and the landowner did object to the order. It sets out in the report how we have dealt with those objections. We don't consider they're valid. We do consider it's important that those trees are retained, and we are asking for you as members to confirm the tree preservation order. So
I suppose if you buy a house there, Marcus, you're now responsible for the maintenance of those trees in your garden.
That hasn't actually been agreed. I don't believe the amended layout has been agreed as yet, but essentially that is almost certainly what will happen now, given that is what the applicants have asked.
Because I suppose if he had a group of trees and he finished the site, he'd move off the site and he'd be responsible for the maintenance of those trees. So by putting them in people's gardens, the owner now of those properties become the person responsible for the maintenance of them.
Yeah.
Very clever move. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I'd just like to move that the order is confirmed.
Yeah, I haven't got a problem. Yeah, seconded. All in favour?
Yeah.
Any against? Clearly carried. Thank you. So we've done the trees. We move over to the planning applications properly. Now, I'm going to have to juggle the applications round, because I know that the local member wants to ask for a site visit. That's on the land rear of Seaton Ho Penny Turnpike, which is on page 179. Do you want to ask for that now, Val? And then the people who've come to speak on that, they can go home.
Beg your pardon, I always forget that. I'm asking for a site visit, please.
Yeah, and that's seconded, is it, by Councillor Franks? Okay, members happy with that? Okay, so the people who've turned up to speak on that land rear of Seaton Hope, Penny Turnpike, you're not now required. Yeah, you need to turn up at the next meeting, I'm afraid. Okay, so you're in for an early bath. Now, I've been approached by one of the officers that the person who's come to speak on, is it Springfield Pennerline? On page 243, he needs to get off because of one of his family members has been taken into hospital. So if I can ask the officer to give us that first, we'll go straight into the agenda properly from there on. So we're on the item at Springfield, which was subject to a site visit today. I know there's some late reps, and it's on page 243. So if everybody's following that, I'll ask Marcus to lead us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, there are some late representations submitted with this application. There are comments from the Council's ecologist, no objection. Comments from Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, no objection. Comments from a planning consultant acting on behalf of the neighbour and a structural report raising some concerns, and comments from the applicant agent attaching a new site plan and details of a retaining wall, along with amended condition 2 and additional condition 15. Those, bear with me as I'm going through the late representations. Which have been copied upside down. Sorry. The conditions themselves just deal with amended plans because of the submission of the retaining wall details, and also details asking for full details of the retaining wall, notwithstanding what's been put in, to be submitted so that we can check the stability and ask for it to be fully implemented prior to the first construction of the dwelling. It does say in those plans first beneficial occupation of the dwelling, but we are amending that to first construction of the dwelling so that that the wall itself is erected and the site secured safely before the house is constructed. That is because we, obviously, those who attended the site visit today will have noted it is a high earth bank that is left floating for all intents and purposes there, and I think it is essential that this retaining wall is erected as quickly as possible, and therefore obviously what we're seeking to do is to make sure that wall goes up before they do any work on the house. It is in fact probably a safety issue in respect of people who are working on the site, that the retaining wall should be put up to ensure that nothing happens in terms of site safety and the bank collapsing. So that is condition 15. It will now read, notwithstanding submitted information, full details of the retaining wall as indicated on plan DP 110A, including materials dimensions, shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The retaining wall shall be fully implemented in accordance with the approved details prior to the first construction of the dwelling hereby approved. So basically to seek that wall is erected first.
Okay.
Just to explain this application, this is an application for a house which has been previously approved on this site. The applicant has sought to amend the design by incorporating what was going to be a ground floor garage now as a dining room, living room, and to build a separate two-car garage at the front of the site. Right. Sorry, we have speakers. Do we have speakers on this?
Sorry?
Do we have
yeah, we have a
speakers?
speaker for and one against.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to come in now.
Yeah, they do. If you finished your report.
Yeah, I finished that.
After you finish your report.
Yeah, okay then. I did have two speakers objecting to the application, but I think there's only one here. So it's Mr. Robert Hathaway. Would you like to come in the hot seat, Mr. Hathaway? And we'll turn the lights on you. Okay, I think you've got 3 minutes. In your own time, the officers will give me the wink. Do you want me to tell you when you're getting towards the end of the 3 minutes, or will you be okay? I'll give you a wink beforehand. Okay, away you go then.
I represent the owners of Bramblewood that lies on higher ground to the immediate west of the site, and the owners of Cedarwood Lodge who live to the east of the proposed site. Both of these nearest neighbours object to the proposed house and garage. As we heard, in 2013, the council previously granted consent for a house on the clear basis that the existing landscaping was retained. However, in advance of any opportunity for this committee to consider the merits of an alternative scheme for the site, the applicant removed all the trees along the front boundary. This completely changes the character of the street scene. This completely changes the character of the street scene. It also opens up views between Cedarwood Lodge and the site. The detrimental impact of the removal of the trees is compounded by the fact that the revised application includes a significantly greater level of glazing on the elevation facing Cedarwood Lodge, which compromises the owner's privacy. Had the trees and other vegetation been retained, this wouldn't have been such a problem. Also, a 1.8 metre high stone wall to replace the trees along the highway introduces an obtrusive feature in the street scene. As we heard from Marcus, the applicant has also undertaken significant excavation on the site, such that the land at Bramblewood has been effectively undermined. This work has damaged the root protection area of the landscaping screen between the two houses. Damage to these trees heightens concerns about privacy. In short, one of the main reasons for granting the 2013 consent, that is the retention of the green screening to avoid overlooking, has disappeared. Councillors, you visited the site today. I'm not sure if it was flooded, but it certainly was last week. We have seen no flood consequences assessment, and neighbours are very concerned about the implications for the site and surrounding area. Without an assessment of flooding, the council and neighbours cannot be sure at what floor level the house needs to be set at, and therefore what its visual impact would be. This information is vital to know before any consent is granted. The lack of forethought in the development of the site is clear when one considers that the applicant was seemingly unaware of the need for retaining walls to prop up his neighbour's collapsing land. This will demand the insertion of large retaining walls, which Marcus just told us about, which will further increase hard surfaces into what was proposed to be a green boundary. Neighbours feel that the applicant has to date acted in, their words, a cavalier manner. It is essential that the site is heavily regulated, including the need for a retaining wall and drainage. I conclude.
15 seconds.
I conclude. The approval previously was for a house to the south of the site. The present proposal sees a double garage on land that was previously kept free. This will be all the more intrusive given the lack of landscape screening. Thank you.
Thank you. Dead on the dot. Perfect. People, would you like to just go back? Because I think some people might want to ask you some questions. It was subject to a site visit, as you said, and it was filled with water, but I think the local member will probably tell us it resembled a swimming pool earlier in the week. So I'll ask members if they want to question on anything you've said. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. No, I have no questions at this stage. We have discussed the matter at length, and I will be putting forward recommendation for approval with some additional bits and pieces. The urgency is to proceed as fast as we can with this retaining wall. Normally, I might have considered trying to refuse the application, further site visits and all this, but the urgency is undoubtedly to get this bank stabilised as fast as we can. The fact that the water is now within the ground condition means that any retaining wall construction will have to be dug in further, which will undermine even further. I mean, I would like to know, have you any knowledge as to whether the ground on your client's land, Bramblewood, is actually moving or not?
Would you like to just turn your microphone on so the public can see you?
Thank you. I'm not an engineer, but certainly from an initial visit in, I think, November, December, to what we see today, I think over that heavy period of rain, the earthworks in the extreme southwestern corner, which is the highest, is about 2.5 to 3 metres, has certainly collapsed since the floodwaters have entered the site.
Okay. Jonathan.
Turn your Just quickly, Chair, if you look at the late reps on this, there's some photos there, and if you look at the gates, you can see the gate post is clearly moved. I couldn't swear that it was right before, but something's happened to that gate post, so that's a sign of the land is moving, and I agree with Andrew, urgency is of the utmost.
Okay, any other member? No? Okay, you can go back into the auditorium and I'll open it up. I think there might be a speaker for the application, is that right? And you, Jonathan Williams from Robertson Francis Partnership. Okay, would you like to come on up? And likewise, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee, and if you remain in your seat, people may want to ask you some questions arising from what you've said. It's only points of clarification, so out of what you've talked about. Okay, where you go.
Thank you. The original application for a new 3-bed detached house on this site was approved on the 26th of November 2013. The new application is also for a 3-bed detached house, which is substantially the same as the extant approval. The main difference is for a detached garage served by a slightly longer driveway. Contrary to neighbours' representations, the garage does not interfere or conflict with the adjacent driveway, its access or the visibility space to it. A driveway as well will be constructed from permeable paving and will not impact on the site's drainage. There are concerns about the conifer hedge having been removed, we gather, but this work was undertaken as it is not a condition of the extant approval and does not conflict with it. Its removal does not compromise the privacy that the proposed building offers, and it will fully respect all the privacy distances with neighbours. Also, we understand the concerns regarding the extent of the ground clearance. Again, this does not contravene any planning legislation, but again, we do recognise concerns, so a new retaining wall is proposed, which will stabilise the bank, as will the building back up of the ground by 600 millimetres because it's been stripped down to be built back up. So that will assist, and also it will help to keep water from entering the site, which has been allowed to do so because of the ground clearance. But of course, it's imperative that the application is approved because the construction of the retaining wall, which is a structure, relies on that planning consent. So we would say that whilst we acknowledge that it perhaps looks like a cavalier attitude, the attitude of the applicant is to fully satisfy neighbours, to build a high-quality building, to reinstate the landscaping, and to make it a positive contribution to the local community. So we see no reason why the application, which is recommended for approval, should be overturned, and we support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'd ask any member who'd like to ask any questions. It's pretty obvious that you took out quite a lot of soil out of it. Resembles something as though you're going to build a swimming pool, and the question has to be asked: why to such a depth?
It's because the entire site is going to be supplied with a high-grade topsoil back to the levels largely that were taken away.
Topsoil. Yeah, you know, why so deep? What are you going to grow there? You know, because it's going to cost a fortune to put that back. Okay, I'll ask Councillor Parker to come in because he's a bit of an expert.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Thank you, Fred. Far be it from me to disagree with a fellow architect, but I must say this is an engineering operation which clearly would require planning permission. There is no planning permission at present, and I have struggled to find the various levels. Clearly, this retaining wall needs to be built as quickly as possible, and what I really would like is some indication as to how quickly that work can be carried out to ensure the stability of the adjacent ground.
The applicant advised me that the work would already have been undertaken were it not for his concerns that he would be carrying out works which were not approved. So the work that was undertaken today, whilst excessive in some people's views, we believe didn't conflict with the extant planning approval. So I think we probably have to beg to differ a little on that, Andrew. But the purpose of the applicant has told us that that work will commence the moment there's a resolution to grant approval, and begs the planning department's forbearance to do that.
Could I just ask you as a supplementary, you did some extensive earthworks on the site. You have caused to take away land that is in the ownership of the council. It's highway land. You didn't have permission, or you as the agent representing the landowner didn't have permission from the Highways Authority to take that land or come onto it. How are you going to reinstate that land?
The land will be reinstated to a culvert, as it was previously, and discussions have taken place between the applicant and the Highways Office to agree that. So that stone will be taken out forthwith, along with the engineering operations for the retaining wall. The clean stone will be used behind the retaining wall to assist drainage, and that'll be fully reinstated.
Okay. Before I take you, Andrew, because you have spoke, can I take John Drysdale? Okay. Straight back over to Andrew then.
As a point of information, I actually don't think there was a culvert. The water generally there used to go down the road. A culvert would not be appropriate. I think you need a decent land drain system. But I'm content, having listened to the highway engineer this morning and his undoubted concerns, to say the least, as the road is now breaking away, that this matter will be resolved and needs to be resolved very, very quickly.
Okay. Councillor Gwyn Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, you mentioned then that you're in discussions with the Highways Officer. How long have those discussions going on, and which Highways Officers are you speaking to? Because the Highways Officer present today wasn't aware of it.
Well, it's outside of the scope of the application, so I haven't been involved directly because I'm the agent for the application. So, as Councillor Johnson correctly pointed out, but I can report that we received correspondence from the Highways Department, which we passed on to the applicant, and direct discussions were had between the Highways Department and the applicant, and reassurances were given that the drainage channel that's been put in and the stone that's been put in on top of it will be removed.
Okay, does that answer your question? No. Okay, is there any other member? Otherwise, I'm going to thank Mr. Williams for taking the hot seat. I'm sorry the questions were in the vein they were, but it does look a bit of a mess in the middle of a village. Okay, it's up to... do you want to come back on anything now, Marcus?
The only point, thank you, Chair. The only point I would make, obviously, is that there is a bit of debate about whether what's been done would require planning permission separately in its own right. That is probably a little bit of a misnomer in any event. The residents who are concerned about their wall, and actually, as Councillor Bird pointed out, it did look possibly as if a pillar had moved on a gateway. That would be a matter they should consider seeking legal redress with the current site owner on, because clearly any works they undertake on their site should not harm neighbouring properties, land or ownership, and that would not be part of the planning process in any event. So if we take that part out of it, I just wanted to make sure you understood that that wouldn't be part of the planning process. One other issue, which I know I spoke to Councillor Parker on site about, and some of the other councillors who were there were concerned about, was the height of the proposed wall at the front of the site, and that was mentioned indeed by the agent for the neighbours. And I think we, having looked at it and having gone on site, we would suggest that at the very maximum a wall height of 1.2 metres would be appropriate, and no higher. I don't know if that meets with the terms of what members were thinking along the lines of, and we could suggest a condition to deal with that, which is, notwithstanding submitted plans and the provisions of the general permitted development order, the boundary wall on the frontage of the site shall be no higher than 1.2 metres in height, and shall be constructed prior to the first beneficial use of the dwelling hereby approved, in accordance with the details that have first been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. So that would limit the height of the wall at the front to 1.2 metres, which I think for those who were there was about the height of the pillars of the neighbouring property.
Any other member want to say anything? Otherwise, we'll go straight to a vote. Councillor Andrew Parker.
Yeah, I'd move officers' recommendations. Certainly thank you to the officers for dealing with this, particularly the question of the retaining wall, as efficiently as they have. And I'm glad to see that we now have a sensible condition for the front of the boundary wall to the front. Of course, a lot of these walls now become partial retaining walls because of the considerable amount of excavation that has been undertaken. I would ask if I could be kept informed, and I'll do it formally now, as to the various conditions when they come in, and I would like to come and actually check them out on behalf of the residents of Pentline. But on that basis, I move officers' recommendations with the 2 additional conditions.
Okay, that's been seconded by Jonathan Bird. Members in favour of that with those extra conditions?
Yeah.
Well, that's clearly carried by everyone. Thank you. So we go back to the top of the planning application list. On page 26, we've got Carlian Road in Dinnis Parish, which was subject to a site visit today. And we've also got late reps. So I'm going to ask Marcus to lead us through that agenda item, and then we'll ask members to come in. Sorry? Oh, yes, you want to make a request, do you? Yeah, yes, we'll do the late reps first. And
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly go through the late reps, that we've had some additional letters from neighbours raising similar concerns to those already addressed in the main report, and also an email from the community councillor also raising matters that have been addressed in the report, but specifically in relation to the traffic impacts of this proposed development, and drawing attention to the potential impact of future developments on the other site identified in the draft LDP on the former St Cyrus school site. I won't go into the details of the report at this stage because I understand we have speakers on this, so I'll do that afterwards.
okay, Marcus, do you want to speak about the report?
Sorry, Chair, I thought we still had a speaker. Okay, well, just to briefly go through the proposed development, this is an outline application with all matters reserved. We had a site visit there today. The site is currently countryside, identified in the interim development plan, but it has been identified in the local development plan as a housing allocation. The outline application seeks consent for up to 70 dwellings on the site. The indicative site layout shown on the screen behind me indicates access off Carlian Road in the most logical place that you would imagine it to be there or thereabouts, although that detail is reserved for reserved matters stage. On-site members did seek some clarification on flooding on the site, as it was quite boggy there today. Just to indicate, this plan here shows you the flood zones as indicated in the tan, so that demonstrates it really is just the outer limit of the site. And if I go back up to the indicative site layout, that's basically where we've got landscaping and open space shown, so there wouldn't be any houses within the flood zone itself, which it goes into in the report. The main issues that raised through consultation, primarily traffic in respect to existing problems within the Dinnis Parish and the Murch estate, which obviously this will provide additional traffic to that area. Our highways colleagues have been in lengthy discussions with the applicants, with amended details and so on submitted in respect of transport assessments, and the conclusion that they have come to is that the impact of this development on its own is acceptable in terms of the traffic impact at the affected junctions. Obviously our highway engineer is here this evening if there are any specific issues to deal with the traffic. Other issues relate to the fact that we've got the railway line along the one boundary, so there are obvious noise and vibration issues associated with that, which are dealt with again through conditions.
Okay, local members then.
I'm glad I've got my minder here. I'd like to thank you and other members for coming to the site visit this morning, but as you will expect, As ward members, we are very concerned at this application for many reasons, and I will list my objections in detail should it be decided that the application must be decided tonight. But however, the officer's report is fairly long and technical and a lot to absorb. As a result, I would like to propose that we defer this application tonight. This site will be one of those discussed at the hearing session and housing allocation on the 2nd of March, plus other prior sessions when the general issue of housing provision will be the subject of sessions on 19th and 29th of January. I'm hoping the committee will agree to this. I do recall a couple of months ago Councillor Gwyn Roberts proposing such a deferment to allow further consideration of a scheme for just 13 houses at Pentremyrick, and his proposal was unanimously agreed by this committee. I am proposing, I have a seconder, and that there is a deferment, and I'm hoping the planning members will support this case.
Okay, I think, do you want to speak on it, Chris Franks?
I'd like to support the proposal to defer. I think this application should be examined by the inspector. The inquiry is due to commence fairly soon. I would remind members that when the draft LDP was proposed, we highlighted the serious flaws, as far as we could see, regarding the traffic arrangements for the development of this site. And I'd refer you to page 83 of the links, corridor improvement schemes and junctions, page item B, Cardiff Road, Millbrook Road, Merch Road. Now, at the time, we were told there could be improvements made to this junction that would resolve many of the traffic issues, and I must say there's widespread scepticism, or there was widespread scepticism about that statement. And now, sometime later, we have the planning application that gives no indication of how this these traffic arrangements will be resolved. Basically, the advice is use the train. Well, the trains are full at peak times, and it's not feasible. So it's I don't want to say we told you so, but that there has been no scheme brought forward that addresses this issue. The LDP will be tested shortly, and I am pleased to second the proposal to defer.
Okay. Did you want to speak, Councillor Wilson?
I just want clarification. You refer to page 83, but page 83 is on another plan application.
Yeah, it is.
So I just wondered what... On the LDP you wrote. Thank you. That's clarification.
I took it that everyone brought their LDP with them at every...
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well, I think we've got an application whether to defer it. I think that's the question, isn't it? Do we defer it or do we debate it? I think I'm going to put the... You want to come back in on some of the things that have been said? Okay, then. The planning officer wants to address the committee before we make that determination.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to draw members' attention on this matter in general, in terms of the status of the LDP and applications like this. Members are aware that we have approved quite a number now of housing sites that have been identified in the local development plan in advance of the local development plan. Members are correct that the planning inquiry into the local development plan will start next week, and the inspector will be considering these issues. At the pre-inquiry meeting, the inspector made it clear that he will be considering these issues afresh, and irrespective of whether or not planning permission is granted on a site, he can still consider whether or not a site should be included in the local development plan or not. Having said that, obviously it would be hugely material to any consideration at the plan whether or not planning permission has been granted. But what I need to draw members' attention to is the fact that despite the fact the inquiry is starting next week, we won't actually have a decision on the local development plan and the inspector's report for possibly 12 months following the close of the inquiry in April-May time. And to delay decisions on applications like this one and like any other housing allocations that we've currently got before us would actually set quite a dangerous precedent in principle because of the delay involved. And obviously we have discussed at length at previous inquiries about the status of the LDP, about the advice in Planning Policy Wales, about the status of LDPs and making decisions based on prematurity in advance of the local development plan and so on. And as this report, as well as others, goes into, the weight that should be attributed to the material consideration of our housing land supply is significant, and hence the reason why officers have, in considering the whole merits of the application, recommended approval, not least because we should be approving housing development in the Vale of Glamorgan where there are no significant reasons not to, given the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and hence this is why members are recommending approval for this housing scheme. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that issue for members. I don't know if there's any further questions on what I've said, or if Marcus wants to add anything.
Just very quickly, Chair, I wanted to point to page 37 of the report, and the paragraph at the top there, which is taken out of Planning Policy Wales, and it says refusing planning permissions, and I know the move was to defer, but in this instance it would be, because it could be up to a 12-month wait, it would be as good as refusing. Refusing planning permission on grounds of prematurity will not usually be justified, except in cases where a development proposal goes to the heart of a plan and is individually or cumulatively so significant that the grant planning permission would predetermine decisions about the scale, location or phasing of new development which ought properly to be taken in the LDP context. There is, where there is a phasing policy in the plan, and that is critical to the plan structure, there may be circumstances in which it is necessary to refuse planning permission on grounds of prematurity if the policy is to have effect. That is not the case here. The stage at which a plan has reached will also be an important factor, and a refusal on prematurity grounds will seldom be justified where a plan is at pre-deposit stage, which we're not now, with no early prospect of reaching deposit because of the lengthy delay which would impose on determining the future use of the land in question. It's a point that we are still looking at a lengthy delay even now as we are about to enter into the hearing on the LDP. This is not by your officers have looked at this. They don't consider this goes to the heart of the LDP, would not be of a size which would warrant deferring on grounds of prematurity, which is what you'd have to do. The report does deal with all this, but ultimately your officers do recommend that a decision is taken.
Thank you. I know John Drysdale indicated. Are there any other members who'd like to come in? But I'll take John Drysdale first.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to note that the deferral on the Pentrameric application was not on the grounds of prematurity, basically. It was to go away and sort out a road safety provision by a rejigging of Section 106 money allocation. So it was an entirely different basis. And so it's not a precedent that supports deferring this application.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. Well, I've got no other member who wants to speak on it. It's just a straight vote. Are we deferring it or are we not? So it's been moved and seconded for a deferment. Okay, thank you. Those in favour of deferment, please show. Nine. Okay, those against? 11. The deferment falls. So I'm going to ask members who want to speak on the application. Anything more to add, Marcus? Nothing to add. Anybody wants to say anything else? Because you did say, Val, that you wanted to come back if it got the consent of the committee. You want to add something to it?
I would like you to actually read Councillor Carolyn Merles Davis. She is a mathematician and has spoken about the figures, you know, on traffic, etc., taking into account other developments that are coming forward. However one puts it, and I do hope those who came by bus today which would have taken note of the approach along several bendy roads. And however one puts it, the proposed siting of up to 70 houses at the end of the existing estate is at the end of a cul-de-sac. As I say, they travel through a bending road, either through Langmeadow or through an already busy junction on the A4055, the main route from Barry to Cardiff. Then along another bendy road past the shops, turning into a short bendy road off an internal bend. Along another bendy road around a left-hand bend, then a right turn into the enclosed site. So the proposal, as I say, is to build at the end of a cul-de-sac. I was living in Chamberlain Row, which comes off the railway bridge, while the existing houses here were being built. There is only one access to the proposed houses. The report refers to the main road to the site. It is the only road to the site, with a very few short lead-offs to houses, and ends up in another cul-de-sac towards the pedestrian route through to the railway. There is a pedestrian route to reach the stepped railway bridge over the railway line. Very useful if you want to travel by train, but a huge inconvenience if you're walking with a baby in a pram and perhaps with at least one other young child. The train service between Cardiff and the Bridge End is good, but at peak times the carriages are very crowded, and I see that every day as I now live directly opposite the station. As to public transport, especially buses, there are no buses at all serving the existing Valley View estate. Perhaps Chris can tell me how many houses are there. 500. 900. I beg your pardon. There is a half-hourly Cardiff bus service from the Cardiff Road to Barry and Penarth, but it is a long walk, especially older residents, to access this service. There is also a 2-hourly interval service on the 89 to Penarth. The Merch Road Castle Drive junction is already extremely busy, and very few drivers use the car park behind the shops. The only thing I'll say for Tesco's is they have surfaced this car park for use, but it doesn't get used, preferring to back out into cars travelling in both directions along Castle Drive. Within the next 2 months, the new health centre will be open at the top of the hill leading to the old St Cyrus site, that's Merch Crescent, so the increase in traffic will be inevitable, leading up to Merch Road and Merch Crescent, a short, steep, another bendy road to yet another cul-de-sac at the top. Referring to the old school site, it's inevitable that as a candidate site in the emerging LDP, there will be an application coming in for at least 300 houses, plus yet another expected application to build at least 50 houses on Cross Common Road. How is the existing infrastructure going to cope? I seem to remember when I wrote my letter to the inspector that the infrastructure is supposed to be in place before new developments. Well, there's no way you can improve the infrastructure in Dinas Powys. The 2 junctions at Castle Drive and Cardiff Road are already busy, particularly at peak times, and the A4055 is already coping with the extra traffic generated from the cars emanating from the 2,000 houses being built on the waterfront. Back to the proposed development, and I did ask on site what would be the need for 5-bedroom dwellings, but I was put in my place on that. Regarding the proposed play areas, and the proposal here is to site one on the opposite side of the through access road, in my opinion, is ridiculous. Plus, the green area backs onto 2 properties with special need adults with dementia living there with carers 24 hours a day. Basically, oh no, hang on a bit. The report says that there are plenty of play areas in Dinas Powys, 2 of which are on the other side of the busy A4055. Park Brynadon is not just for Dinas Powys residents. It's excellent as it is a Vale-wide facilities. Regarding noise attenuation for some of the new houses, I think it is unreasonable to expect people to live in houses with windows that shouldn't be opened. I live fronting onto the Cardiff Road, and I never open the windows, or ever have, in any rooms facing the road because of the constant road traffic, especially regular ambulance and police vehicles, plus the noise of trains stopping and starting from the station. plus the noise and what's the word, vibration from the heavy coal trains travelling to and from Aberthaw Power Station. And as a side, I will tell you I got my banding reduced to what it was before because of those factors when I applied. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Shall I ask the officer to respond to them before I take other members?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, a lot of the points that you've raised have been dealt with in the report. I'll just pick up on a couple of issues that you did raise in particular. I'll leave our highways officer to deal with the traffic impact side of things, I think. Just touching on the open space that you referred to, the report talks about a surplus. That refers to outdoor sport, which in the ward generally there is a large surplus. We wouldn't normally require a site of this sort of size to provide outdoor sport, which might be a football pitch or a tennis court in any event. But because of the oversupply in the ward, that's why we're just talking about children's play on site. It's a completely valid point about them showing it on the open space opposite the site, if you like, outside the application site, and this is something officers have raised as a concern. And as the application is in outline, all of those details are indicative, and we've certainly indicated to the applicants that at reserved matters stage we would be looking to have the children's play actually on the site and integral to the development, which is our normal approach to such matters. So hopefully that would allay those fears. I think all the other issues really have been addressed in the report, other than I'll just transfer you over to Mike Clark, who's the operational manager for highways, and he can go into some of the traffic details.
Thank you. Just to clarify, the transport statement which was produced for the development, it indicates that there are no capacity issues on the links or junctions leading to the site, other than the Merch Cardiff Road junction, and it actually indicates that those issues are negligible, less than 5% increase in traffic movements at that junction, and on that basis it's difficult to raise any objection to the proposal. The fact that there may be additional developments in the area at a later stage, possibly at the old Cyrus location, is something that we haven't been able to look at as part of the development or the proposals, and we've specifically determined or considered the traffic movements and traffic implications from the actual development of Caerleon itself when making the comments back to the planning department.
Okay, Councillor Franks.
Thank you. I won't repeat the previous comments, but I would just say that I think the decision to go ahead with consideration of this application basically destroys the LDP inquiry. I see no point in pursuing with that very expensive operation. People have been seriously misled when we were told some time ago, a few years ago, that these highway matters could be addressed. We were told quite clearly, yes, all of them. And just to remind you, there's about 20 of these junctions, not the links and the corridors, the actual junctions. Whether any of them will ever be addressed remains to be seen. But I think members of the public have been led up the garden path when we were told that this junction in particular could be addressed, and clearly it is not going to be. So if it hasn't been moved, I will move disapproval of this.
Refusal.
Refusal, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So we got to, and you seconded it, didn't you, Val? Okay. Is there any other member then, apart from the local members? Councillor Penrose.
Thank you, Chair. There's 3 points I'd like to raise, actually. The first one is the consultation of Dŵr Cymru, Welsh Water. I do note that condition 12 requires a drainage scheme. What concerns me, and it affects my ward of Sully and Lavenel, is that we know the Sully Moors Welsh Water pumping station is working at 130% capacity at the moment. and has no surplus capacity. So it doesn't matter whatever drainage system we're going to put further overload onto that system. I would like to see reports from Welsh Water in more detail, much of the tone that we had at Colwinston, where Colwinston development that was granted planning permission was deferred until such time as Welsh Water uprated the pumping stations. I think this situation applies in this case. The second one is Natural Resources Wales, which after the last few months of flooding we've had all around Britain, we seem to be quite light-hearted about this being in a flood risk zone. We again in Surrey suffer the consequences. It comes down, it floods along Surrey Moors. It has in the past shut off the Surrey Moors Road along with Hayes Road by the excessive flooding, because when those fields flood, there's nowhere else to go over the highways. I do appreciate the work highways have done the environmental services in clearing the culverts, and we have held the flooding at bay, but I think flooding is a concern. And the final one is a comment endorsing what Councillor Franks has said on highways. I appreciate the comment by a highways officer that it's only 5% more, but that's 5% going into a log jam. Sully has become, and Penarth, Lower Penarth, the Dinas Powys bypass, which we've never built. We've been 30 odd years talking about building a bypass for Dinas Powys, and it's never happened. But the consequence is that Sully and Lavernock have taken the brunt now of the additional traffic along with Sully Road. I think we should be mindful of this if we do vote for approving this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to comment back on any of that, Marcus?
Just to confirm, in terms of the Welsh Water comments, I'll draw members' attention to page 28, which summarises their response. They have requested their standard conditions in relation to foul and surface water drainage. They are not objecting to the application in principle in terms of the additional flows to their sewage pumping station. We would have expected them to have done so if there was a problem along the lines of what you have indicated. As members will be aware, when we come to the Darren Farm application, there's a requirement there to not occupy any of the houses until they've upgraded their system. They haven't commented to that effect on this application, and therefore we're not concerned that drainage is a reason to refuse this application and can be dealt with by the conditions. But also on the flooding issue, again, we draw your attention to the flood consequence assessment, and I'm not being flippant in dismissing that. It purely is that the application would comply with all the planning policies and regulations in respect of flooding, and is not deemed to be at risk or going to cause flooding issues off the site. So that's why we feel that issue has been dealt with. And obviously the traffic impact we have discussed, there will be traffic from this scheme, but in the round we have to approve housing development across the Vale of Glamorgan. This has been identified as a sustainable location for new housing development, and that's why we are recommending approval for the scheme.
You wanted to come back, Bob?
Just briefly to say, and I do appreciate the consultation that's come from Welsh Water and the officer's comment, I don't share the confidence in Welsh Water. They've let us down on numerous schemes, including, I think, look towards Ogmore as being another one where they're having problems. We're having problems. I think Welsh Water, it's about time they came to the table and took up their responsibilities. They're being very flippant about passing these schemes when they know that their infrastructure is substandard. And I have suggested before to Marcus that we should be really question them more strongly, because I think they're quite flippant on the consultation comments they make.
Thank you. Anything to add, Marcus, to that?
They are a statutory undertaker. They make those comments. We obviously do meet with them, but we can only rely on what they say.
Okay. Any other member? No? Well, it's been moved in second to refuse the application, so I'll take that first. Members wanting to refuse the application, please show. 9. Okay. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. 11. It's clearly carried. Thank you. Moving swiftly on then, with the next application is the land at northwest of Cowbridge on page 73. I just said that, officer's recommendation. Did I say officer's recommendation?
Yeah, but she wants to vote against the officers.
Yeah, if you want to vote against the officer's recommendation a second time, I will take that vote. You're quite right. Those in favour of refusing the officer's recommendation, please show. This is for refusal. Yeah, but if I'll clarify it, she's a technical point. You should have to go back and ask for those who are going to refuse it. We've approved it. We have approved it. 11 votes. And I asked you, did you want to show? And we've had 3 hands shown. So I take it the rest are abstentions. Yeah, that's my boy. There we are then. Moving back, as said, to Darren Farm. I know that there's some late representations on this. It was subject to a site visit. I think we spent about 50 minutes going around the site. So we've viewed it at all angles. And we've walked up to the field where the top of the lane starts. So I'll ask the officers to go through it, and I think it'll be subject to a debate then. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a number of late reps, which I'll just run through quickly. We have comments from Welsh Water requesting amendments to the proposed condition. That condition was proposed based around the comments that were originally made by Welsh Water, but they have essentially asked for those that condition to be strengthened. So that is condition number 7, amended condition number 7, no dwelling or school hereby approved shall be occupied prior to 31st of March 2018 unless Llanblethian sewage pumping station and the Cowbridge waste treatment works to which the development shall drain have first been upgraded and confirmation provided in writing by the local planning authority that the upgraded works have been completed in full and the necessary off-site improvements to the public sewerage system between the development site and Llanblethian sewage pumping station as identified in the hydraulic modelling assessment reference SE28B Darren Close Cowbridge Revision 1 issued February 2015 have been completed. No. So that is just a belt and braces condition, making sure that all the works necessary are undertaken to the sewage system. We have at least 66 letters and emails of objections from residents which have been received since the closing of the report, along with letters from Jane Hutt AM and Alan Cairns MP raising concerns specifically about drainage matters. We have a note from the agent which addresses drainage concerns and comments from the Council's drainage engineer and an email from Natural Resources Wales confirming that suitable conditions will address a detailed drainage scheme. We have comments from the Council's ecologist raising concern with regard to ground nesting birds, and an additional condition has been proposed to mitigate any possible effects from that, which is prior to the commencement of any site clearance works, an appropriate scheme for mitigation for skylark and lapwing, and details of the timescale for such mitigation works shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and any approved scheme of mitigation shall be undertaken in full accordance with the approved details. So that condition has been added following the ecologist's comments. We have an amended condition 18 which relates to amended plans that were received after the production of the report, so it's just detailing all the proposed plans within the condition. One final point of note, and this is quite an important note, you were circulated as members a letter received from Welsh Government today. That letter followed a request from a member of the public, I assume, to call the application in for consideration. The letter itself is important in a number of respects, but I will just draw a couple of points out before we go any further. The letter is, by its very nature, a little disjointed because how Welsh Government works is that when it gets a request for a call-in, it notifies all its various arms to find out if there are any concerns from each of those various arms. So in this case, it includes the planning policy branch, the minerals branch, the airfield safeguarding zone branch, the planning policy branch for flooding, the branch for responsibility for listed buildings, also Natural Resources Wales. Again, it consults itself separately, and it also then, following the receipt of all those various comments, makes a decision about whether the application should be called in for consideration by Welsh Government. Just want to pick a couple of points out. The planning policy branch has looked at this application, an outline application for 475 dwellings for a mixed-use development and a road on land which is currently in agricultural use. It advises that the officer's report makes it clear that it does not comply with housing policies in the adopted UDP. However, the site is allocated for housing in the emerging local development plan. It makes it clear it's not a strategic site, and that it proposes 40% affordable housing. It then goes on to say, based on the information available, the proposed development does not appear to be contrary to national policy on housing development, and a call-in request is not recommended. Talking about flooding, the Welsh Government policy branch with responsibility for flooding risk, which is a separate body to Natural Resources Wales, they interact but they are two separate bodies, that has looked at the site and states the application site is a greenfield area to the west of Cowbridge, adjoining the A48 to the north and the B4270 to the south. The development advice map, which is used in conjunction with Planning Policy Wales and Technical Advice Note 15, Development and Flood Risk, indicates that the site is in Zone A, where there is a very low risk of tidal or fluvial flooding. The application is therefore not contentious in terms of flood risk, and it is my view that the local planning authority is best placed to determine the application, and I recommend the application should not be called in. So that is Welsh Government's own flood advisors. Then we have Welsh Government's advisors with regard to listed buildings and historic landscapes, who are known as CADU. They have made comments, having considered the documentation submitted with your request and the criteria for call-in, we have considered that the local planning authority has properly identified and addressed the relevant issues in accordance with national planning policy and guidance concerned with the historic environment. We do not consider that the application raises any issues of more than local importance, nor does it, in our opinion, trigger any of the issues set out in your consultation that may persuade the Minister to call in the planning application. CADU would not therefore recommend calling. There are a number of other bodies which are probably less relevant, but one of the next ones is the Natural Resources Wales comments. They make it clear that they have no concerns under European protected species grounds, and that they therefore have no objections on that basis. They also, having looked at flood risk and surface water, say TAN 15 advises that for development located in Zone A, the justification test is not applicable and surface water requirements only apply. The acceptability criteria for no increase in flooding elsewhere to occur as a result of the development is also relevant. Given the location of the development in the Zone A, surface water requirements should be assessed, and we note that this aspect has been included in the environmental statement. So they have no concerns there. And it says, subsequent reference to Natural Resources Wales has been made regarding drainage and flood risk, where it is noted we raise no objections in terms of flood risk and ecology, and as a consequence of updated nesting bird surveys. So they are not going to object to the application or call it in for consideration by the Minister. And it says, we therefore consider that the application would more appropriately be dealt with the local planning authority, and the application should not be called in by ministers. So the final paragraph, number 5 of the letter, says, having considered the issues associated with the application in light of Welsh Government's policy on call-in and the advice provided by consultees, I consider that those issues are of no more than local importance. In view of this, I do not consider the application should be called in for determination by the Welsh ministers, and it is now for the Council to determine the application as it sees fit. So that is an important letter, obviously, because it means that Welsh Government does not see this application as one which the Council could not determine. It is relevant just to point out that if a decision is made tonight on this application to approve it, we still, because of the number of houses and because of the size of the site, we will still have to notify Welsh Government and give them 21 days to call the application in if they so fit. That is just the procedure which has to be undertaken, even though they've made a policy statement already, we still have to do that. So there is still a procedure that has to follow it, even if this application is approved. Very quickly, I'll run through the application. As I've stated and as the letter set out, it is a hybrid application, which means that parts of the application are in full and part of the application is in outline. The full part of the application is for the construction of a link road connecting the Cowbridge Bypass, A48, with Lantwick Major Road, B4270, and associated highway works, including footpaths, cycleways, bus stops, landscaping, and associated engineering and infrastructure works. So that is the full part of the application. There is an outline application as well, which is part of it, for a mixed-use residential-led development with all matters reserved except access, the access being provided off the new road, which we talked about in full. The proposals include the demolition of the existing farm buildings, up to 475 residential units, including 40% affordable housing. Densities across the site will range between 20 to 40 dwellings per hectare, with the highest density areas located centrally and lower densities to the site edges. Building heights are indicated as 2 and 2.5 and 3 storey, with parameter plans indicating heights of between 4 and 12 metres from existing ground level, taking account of topography. A minimum 2 hectare reserve site for a primary school with playing fields, car parking, landscaping works and public realm. Public open space including parks, natural and semi-natural green spaces, amenity green spaces and facilities for children and young people, including 5 local areas of play, 2 locally equipped areas of play and 1 neighbourhood equipped area of play, totalling 0.22 hectares. Infrastructure works including internal access roads, public realm, footpaths, cycleways and vehicular access. Associated engineering and landscaping works including surface water drainage, sustainable drainage, pumping station and levelling and creation of earth bunds and mounds. Landscaping, street trees, retention where possible of trees and hedgerows, new areas of planting and open space. A new pedestrian cycle link using the existing farm track to the northeastern corner of the development of the site, linking to Darren Hill. A new combined access onto Lantwick Major Road to the southeast corner of the site, combined with a vehicular access and provision of a new crossing point of Lantwick Major Road to link with the existing footpath network to the centre of Cowbridge, and off-site highway improvements to the public highway at Nash Corner, where the B4270 Lantwick Major Road meets the B4268. So I'm sorry I had to run through all of those, but that's what the proposal is for.
Okay, we've got a number of speakers. I think I'll call the first two, who it's Councillor David Morgan, who's going to speak against the recommendations. He's a representative of the Town and Community Council, so if you can come up first, along with Dr. Christopher Pearce, who's going to be an objector to the application, and I don't know, have you decided between the two of you who's going to go first? Sorry? Are you the only one turned up?
No, he's going to speak first.
Yeah, you can both go and sit. There's 2 seats there. Okay? Unless you're not speaking to each other? Oh, right, okay. Okay, you've both got 3 minutes each. I'll take the first speaker. Is that you, Dr. Pearce?
No, that's
Mr. Morgan, Councillor Morgan. If you speak first, and then we'll ask Dr. Pearce to speak second, and then we'll take any questions and points of clarification when you're finished. Are you both sitting comfortably?
Yes, thank you indeed.
Then you can begin.
Right. First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity of speaking on behalf of our Town Council. I first make 2 general points. 1, the application seems to have seduced your officers into accepting the proposal as the site lies within the amended draft local development plan. This is yet to be approved. Your council has used the prematurity argument elsewhere in the Vale. Why not here? Second, why should Cowbridge, with only 3% of the Vale's population, accepts 6% of the new housing. Let us for a moment park your office's 100-page report and focus on two key issues. First, we have a site on the higher slopes above the town, which can be seen from just about everywhere. The proposed 475 houses are 7 times bigger than the Verlands and 4 times bigger than Brookfield Park in Cowbridge. For a 145-unit application some years ago, as part of the same site, your council properly refused the application with the Welsh Office support and stated, and I quote, "The proposed development would, by reason of its size, scale and location, unacceptably impact upon the intrinsic value of the attractive landscape setting and character of the historic settlement of Cowbridge." Council members, need I say more? Secondly, the increase in population of at least 25% will impose severe collateral damage on the town. We detailed these concerns in our submissions, but they have been ignored. Some years ago, your council with Welsh Office considered many of these concerns to be sufficient to refuse a development 3.5 times smaller on this site. Why, to use a traffic light analogy, have you gone from red to green? Let me refer to traffic congestion and parking. With at least 600 additional cars resulting from this development, many of which will be used on a daily basis between home, school and town centre, we cannot cope with that scale of increase. Gridlock and an absence of parking areas will become major everyday problems and damage the reputation of our town as a prime shopping area. The construction of the link road will not affect these local journeys. Drainage problems too have been well documented, from flooding adjacent to the site to the dangerous precedent and effects of the Rainscape scheme.
10 seconds.
Why should local people suffer major disruption to facilitate the enormous scale of this proposal? Can I just have that?
Yes, I'll let you sum up. It's
Okay.
not a problem.
Finally, in our view, planning applications should be judged on a balanced analysis of the key issues. Sadly here, there appears not to have been the case. It is as though your officers have looked through the wrong end of the telescope, seen what they want, and made very selective analysis accordingly. How else can their implausible U-turn from red to green on this site be approved? As a professional planner, and I've nearly finished, on behalf of our council, I say the proposal is wrong in concept, wrong in scale, wrong in location. Where on earth is the planning logic, common sense, and consistency and credibility in making this decision?
Okay.
The people of Cowbridge have been ignored.
Yeah, I'm going to have to stop you because I'll get complaints from the other side.
Okay.
It wouldn't be fair. Okay, Dr. Pearce, would you like to lead us on?
Turn your mic
Yeah,
up.
thank you.
Yes, I'm the coordinator of the Cowbridge and Lebanon Residents Group. I strongly advise this committee to refuse this planning application because the report on which the approval recommendation is based is seriously flawed. I'm now going to deal with the 4 main aspects in which it is flawed. First, it neglects to consider the Council LDP report Housing Land Supply Trajectory issued in November 2015 at the request of the LDP examiner. Members may have already seen this report. If not, it's a very important one. This report shows the LDP provides a healthy housing land supply from 2016 to 2025, the penultimate year of the plan, by which time the LDP housing requirement of 9,500 dwellings will have been provided. This is also true when the contribution from this application site is excluded, which is not therefore a material consideration, as it says in the report. Therefore, wherever the report quotes a need for housing land supply as a material consideration to outweigh sound planning reason for refusal, it is wrong and unsound. The officer's number 2 point of being flawed, the officer's report is also seriously flawed because it fails to mention or deal with a key part of the amended application, the Rainscape scheme. This scheme is proposed by Welsh Water to collect surface water from a large section of Cowbridge High Street and pipe it into the River Thor. downstream of the flood alleviation scheme and upstream from the residents' houses, which had frequently been flooded before 2007. The alleviation scheme has been totally affected. If you want to see how effective, you can see pictures in the GEM today in preventing flooding, but its effectiveness could be negated in periods of heavy rainfall by this rainscape scheme, which is an issue of high concern to residents. Putting more water in the river here increases the water level beyond the control of the protected scheme. Thirdly, the office report is completely inconsistent in dealing with issues of prematurity. It dismisses the issue in this report because it says the site is too small, 475 houses, 4.5% of the LDP total. However, when the reporting on application on two smaller 200 house sites, land of North Port West Road, Waycott Cross, land at Walters Farm, Waycott Cross, the officer's report have invoked prematurity as a reason for refusal. That is unsound. The officer's report is remiss in not commissioning an independent assessment of the value of the landscape of the site. Previous evaluations have been reported. It's in the Thor Valley Special Landscape Area.
10 seconds.
That doesn't preclude development, but it should be compatible with the landscape, which this clearly isn't. The Vale of Glamorgan land map evaluation classes the site as high in historic importance and outstanding in cultural value. 2 independent landscape evaluations have been done before recommending the site should not be developed. Finally, there is a point of principle here in determining this planning application. This is the principle of democratic involvement by communities in planning their own environment. This is strongly advocated in Planning Policy Wales. The Council have gone to great lengths to involve residents in consultation developing the LDP.
Yeah,
Residents have responded to this enthusiastically and expect the input of those consultations to go through to the LDP examination stage, which is now happening.
I'm going to have to guillotine you there, Dr. Pearce. I'm sorry.
I have one more sentence.
No, it's you have pushed it to the limits, I'm afraid. I know I've got Councillor Cox to speak next, if he wants to come and take his place. But are there any points of clarification that either speaker you would like to ask any questions of? Okay. Right. Okay then. You're free to step down. Thank you. Councillor Cox, can you come and join us?
I'll be behind you, Chairman.
Oh, super duper. We've got a place for you there.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, special seat for you. Yeah. And 3 minutes is afforded to you. And
It has been time, Chairman. I hope it'll
yeah.
3 minutes.
No. Do you want to put your mic on, Councillor Cox? Thank you.
Thank you. On page 91 of the report are the objections of Councillor Hunter-Jarvie and myself to this planning application. Under the question of prematurity, the emerging LDP, the report notes that this requires careful judgment, and as a refusal on the grounds of prematurity could not be sustained. But the planning inspector has already held meetings and detailed his examination programme. Can the urgency be that the applicant has doubts over whether the application will be confirmed in the final LDP? The planning inspectors in 2003, at a 12-day hearing, refused an appeal to build 145 houses in this area, agreeing with many of the points made by Rob Thomas, then head of planning and transportation for the Vale Council, who vigorously objected to the development. These objections for 145 houses are still valid and magnified with this proposal for 475 houses. I complained at that inquiry on flooding issues, having chaired 2 public meetings following flooding at Westgate from water flowing from Darren Farm. Today's report agrees that there is a history of surface water flooding emanating from this site. The paper talks about extreme events and the need to mitigate flood impact to people and property. It appears that my continuing concerns are supported. The other drainage concern is the possible discharge of some surface water into the River Thor, which flooded several times in 2000 and was a catalyst for the 2006 flood alleviation scheme. Vale officers have not yet received or approved any current scheme and have placed a condition on drainage matters. With a considerable local anxiety, it is not satisfactory for this to be a reserved matter. Among the main points made by the Council in 2003 were residents were not likely to walk or cycle into the town centre because of the distance and gradient, and even with a link road, there would be a net increase in traffic through the town centre. The inquiry inspector agreed with these points, and they have not changed. Roads in Cowbridge are already gridlocked at times, and there are insufficient car parking spaces. The Council has no proposals for improving the infrastructure or for additional car parking, except for the proposed development of the market site, where a Capita report, commissioned by the Vale Council, showed that this would only provide 21 more car parking spaces. The development we are discussing today is not sustainable, and with no infrastructure improvements, the viability of Cowbridge will be reduced. Finally, this is a greenfield site, described as such in the LDP. There are no significant reasons why it should be considered as suitable for development. Too many queries, too many issues to resolve, and too many reserved matters. I ask you to vote against granting planning permission.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Right, we've got some people who want to speak in favour of the development. How about that? Topping the list is Mr. Gareth Williams from Nathaniel Litchfield and Partners, who's going to speak for. You've got Dean Swan from Brookbanks Consulting for, Mr. Richard Stacey from JMP for, and Carlos Abraham from Baker Consultants for. Excellent. And do we know who's going to go first? If you all introduce yourselves as you go along in time.
Yep.
To be fair, you are entitled to 1.5 minutes each.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we understand that. What if
you're going to speak very quickly? Are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. No, we're aware of the rules there. So if I start off, I'll cover the planning, and then we'll go on to drainage, transport, and ecology. So if that's okay.
Fine. And then if you remain in the seats, you may have some questions of clarification to come to you from the floor. Okay, and then whatever comes out of this now, I'm going to ask the planning officer to come back on. Okay, thank you. First one.
Thank you. I mean, we clearly don't have time to give a detailed overview of the scheme, but we wanted to make ourselves available to respond to any questions that you may have. Since the planning application was submitted in December 2014, we've worked closely with your officers and also engaged with the local community. The scheme has been subject to 2 major revisions to reflect this consultation process. There is an urgent need for housing across the Vale of Glamorgan, including the rural Vale, and within that context, Cowbridge is the most sustainable location with a full range of accessible services. Importantly, 40% of the new homes will be affordable homes. There is a need for these houses to be delivered as soon as possible, which means granting planning permission now. Otherwise, there is a significant risk that you won't be able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply on adoption of the LDP. We need planning permissions to be able to build, not just allocations. This scheme will deliver a much-needed link road that is unlikely to be delivered in any other way. A new primary school is also planned for the site, and it was evident from our discussions with the local community that both the existing Welsh and English primary school are inadequately housed. As my colleagues will now confirm, there are no technical reasons to reject this planning application. I share the view of your officers that there are significant positive material considerations that outweigh any conflict with the adopted UDP policies.
Thank you.
The drainage design offered has the potential to have a beneficial impact on both the surface and foul water networks.
To expand on that, taking the surface water first, currently rainwater falls on the fields, infiltrates into the ground, but also flows towards the ditch. Our proposal mimics this, but our design looks to return more water to the ground, thereby relieving the pressure on the surface water system, in times of inundation especially. We have modelled this in a 1 in 100 year plus climate change event. Onto the foul water system, Welsh Water have modelled our impact on their system and proffered 3 solutions. The first 2 are fairly standard. This involves upsizing the pipes to take the extra capacity from the development. The third, as mentioned by other speakers, is the Rainscape scheme. This is an innovative solution known as Rainscape, and it should be understood that most foul flooding is caused by surface water in the foul system, not foul water on its own. Their design is to remove this high street surface water from the foul system, thus relieving an existing problem and giving capacity for growth. I note residents' concern over what happens to the removed surface water from the high street, so please be rest assured that Welsh Water will be carefully designing this to be released slowly back into the surface water system, thus relieving chances of flooding in both the foul and the surface water system, and thereby offering betterment over the current situation.
Thank you. We're just going to reset it, but I'm not going to, because other people have run over the time. Okay.
Thank you. During the course of the application, we have consulted with the Transport and Highways officers, both for the design of the new link road and the transport assessment looking at the development impacts. It has been agreed that a robust assessment has been undertaken, which included parking and traffic surveys, and the link road design is also acceptable. The link road will be effective in taking over 1,000 through vehicle movements from the town and around 300 from Clonsworthy village. This will include a high proportion of HGV movements. It provides a safer and more direct route to the A48 away from the B4268, and also significantly reducing accidents at the black spot on the existing junction with the A48. The road is physically designed to direct traffic to use it, with Clanwick Major Road forming the minor arm to the south and a weight limit implemented through the village. Associated with this will be improvements to the Nash Junction, traffic calming at Penarail Terrace, and a reduction in the speed limit on Clanwick Major Road to the east. Other measures include new bus stops and shelters for existing and future services, crossing facilities on Clanwick Major Road, and an overall contribution towards sustainable transport of just under 1 million. The link road represents major infrastructure provision, which together with a package of measures will result in an overall net benefit for existing and future residents.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm representing the ecology issues here, and first thing to say is that we did a full assessment of the ecological issues.
That's your time up now, sorry.
Regarding the site. I'm going to be very quick anyway, thank you.
No, you're all right.
Yeah.
They've saved the best till last.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we've looked at the designated wildlife sites in the area, done a habitat mapping exercise to identify all the habitats of interest there, and done a range of species surveys for bats, birds, and a whole range of other things. 3 points to make following that is that the conclusion of the environmental impact assessment in terms of the ecological issues, that there would be a long-term positive impact from the development, and the adverse impacts are really limited to the loss of low-value arable habitats and improved grassland, which not very valuable for nature conservation. No objection was raised by Natural Resources Wales in terms of the scheme, apart from them recommended conditions. Second point is the council ecologist did raise some issues, but only in relation to ground nesting birds and the presence of lapwing in the area, of which there are records dating back for a number of years. Our surveys showed that there was no evidence in recent surveys of lapwing being present on site, and there will be a range of benefits to a whole variety of different bird species as a result of the design of the scheme. And note that the condition referred to by Mr. Goldsworthy earlier seemed to address the ecologist concerns in relation to ground nesting birds. And the third point is that the development as it stands provides a large substantial area of green space that's going to provide new areas of grassland, hedgerows and trees and scrub down the western boundary of the site, and also a green corridor running through the site from east to west as well, which will help with bat commuting through the area as well. So overall it's a positive picture in terms of ecology. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I know that some members are eager to ask some questions. They've already indicated. So I'll take the first one. That's Councillor Franks.
I'd like to congratulate this impressive team. I think councillors could take a lesson in brevity and clarity, even if we don't necessarily agree with all the comments. What I would like to focus on is the surface water, and bearing in mind, you know, you're a high-powered team. Why haven't you produced yet a comprehensive drainage scheme for this site? I made a note that you're going to return surface water to the ground. Well, I take that to mean soakaways, but I don't know. And there's reference to separating the combined sewers in shall I say, old Cowbridge. Now, that's going to be quite a project, isn't it? What is the extent of that scheme? And again, why hasn't that been presented to us and to the public? Because from what I can see, that really is fundamental to the project. Thank you.
Yes, would you? You're the drainage, aren't you? Yeah. Thank you.
Just to answer on the point of technical, well, obviously it's an outline application, and therefore the proposal that we've put forward shows that in principle all the existing ground conditions, for example the soakaways we've mentioned, have all been measured and shown to work on the site, and therefore we've done very detailed site surveys involving actual holes in the ground, filling them full of water and seeing it disappear. So a lot of investigation has gone into that to show that a mixture of soakaways and holding basins will work on the site. So that it basically proves in principle that happens, and obviously as the detail comes forward, where the housing moves around, it shows that in those general areas they work. That's why you don't put a very detailed drainage scheme straight away, but you want to prove in principle that it works, and that whatever you do or wherever it might go works in those areas. The whole site's been assessed. In terms of the foul water, I think that's quite important. The Rainscape obviously is a scheme that's being brought forward by Welsh Water across the board. It's an £80 million investment that they're looking at, and it's a real key issue for foul across the whole country. Is that foul gets inundated with surface water, and you can either leave it alone and upsize the pipes, and you'll still get the problem of the differential between the two flows. So when a big storm hits, the foul might be running along at its normal levels, but then it gets hit by the storm water and causes the flooding. Or do you address that directly, which is what the Rainscape scheme is trying to do? Now, it's not the only option, it's their preferred option. So we can go back and not do the Rainscape scheme and not impact, say, for example, on High Street, and you'll still have a mitigation scheme in place. But this offers a long-term benefits over and above this development to the actual foul network as a whole. Now, the impact of that, they've done detailed modelling, and that will demonstrate that they need to hold water from around about 2.22 hectares, which is High Street itself. There are many ways you can do that. It might be through a trench with a pipe in. It might be that they identify an area of land away from the site that they can get the water to, that then goes into either a holding basin or in what we call cellular storage, milk crates basically underground. They hold that water back, and then they let that go back in at greenfield run rates, so like a field, back into the river system. It's quite an innovative scheme, but it does address a classic problem that hits towns all over the country. So I think it's quite important to say it's not the only option on the table, but from an engineering and a long-term prospect, regardless of this application, I think it's a good scheme to come forward.
Okay. Any questions out of what he's brought forward?
The only thing is, for the last 100 years, drainage engineers have moved away from soakaways, done everything possible to avoid them, and now we seem to be going. Back to the 19th century.
I didn't know it was a soakaway, but you can answer the question.
Yeah, the current, we're moving away from mechanical means as much as possible, because as we've seen up in Cumbria, if you've got a selection of sluice gates and all these sorts of mechanical ideas, you want to mimic what happens naturally. And that was the whole point of this design process, is we mimic what's happening now. So what happens is, water falls on the ground, goes through the topsoil and ends up into the permeable layers below. Some of that runs down towards the ditch. We're doing exactly the same. So we're trying to mimic the natural area, if you like. So as if the development isn't there is the process. And at the top of the train, the first thing you're supposed to look at in terms of Natural Resources Wales and the Environment Agency is, can you get the water back into the ground rather than flowing to both, you know, natural and artificial ditch or river systems. That's the idea. You want the water back in the ground so that it goes back into the aquifers, and this site sits on an aquifer, so by very nature we want to put the water back where it belongs. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Yes, Councillor Andrew Parker.
Yeah. Picking up the point on in aquifers, you will not have seen it, but there was severe flooding 2 weeks ago around the church, and the whole of the graveyard was flooded. So obviously the capability of natural drainage straight down into the substructure is not working at the moment. Welcome your observations on what would happen if your scheme goes ahead.
So you're quite right, and that will be a mixture of, obviously, when that happens in those areas, it will be a mixture of overland flow and groundwater flows. Overland flow is normally and predominantly the issue that causes inundation, not necessarily groundwater, because once it's in the ground it seeps at a set rate, where surface water above ground, as we all know, can inundate systems quite dramatically. What I would say is that it's far more controlled when it goes back into the ground, but you can control that and we can hold that back. And under current government legislation, they're actually looking at instructing farmers to hold water back on their fields before it goes into those systems, to allow some of it to infiltrate into the ground and then slowly go back in. This is exactly what this system that we're proffering does. It holds it back inside people's gardens and in soakaways, or in these infiltration trenches and or these infiltration basins on the site. So will it resolve panacea for all flooding issues? No, but it won't exacerbate the condition, and it's my opinion that it'll actually reduce the strain on the current surface water network that leads to that flooding.
Okay, thank you. Any other member? Otherwise I can ask the gentlemen to sit down back in their seats. If you, oh, hold on, Councillor Parker wants to come back with the supplementary.
Yeah, just one point, almost picking up on Bob's point. No houses can be occupied until the 31st of March 2018, when the treatment works supposedly will be upgraded sufficiently to do it. If that doesn't go ahead, and we all recognise that that is a probability or a possibility, how will you deal with it? Because you will be under development at that moment in time, and you will have to have a moratorium or something on sales, etc. How would you handle a delay after the 31st of March 2018?
As I understand that, that's a backstop date, that Welsh Water expect the works to be done prior to that. But actually there is also the opportunity for the developer to actually accelerate that programme by forward funding those works. So there is an opportunity to work with Welsh Water to accelerate that and actually bring forward that backstop date. I mean, it will require funding put forwards, but my understanding is that that's then reclaimed against infrastructure charges levied against dwellings later on down the line.
Okay, thank you. I think you can take your seats back in the auditorium. Thank you very much. Having heard the debate, it's up to Marcus now to come back with any points of clarification or you want to raise from the speakers who've spoken.
Thank you. Yes, if I just deal with a couple of issues raised by the speakers so that members can then ask questions, I suppose, based around that. The issue of prematurity was raised, and obviously we've talked about that both on a number of occasions, on a number of different applications. What I would point out here in this particular case, and the report does point it out as well, we did have, albeit a smaller application, of Primrose Hill, and we did use prematurity as an argument in that particular application to try and defend the decision. The inspector, and the wording of the inspector is in the report, quite clearly threw it out and took a view that it wasn't premature. My personal professional view is prematurity is going to be almost impossible to argue on the vast majority of housing sites unless there are very, very, very detailed arguments from the council as to why it goes to the heart of a plan. and that is our view in this particular case as well. And I have to say that view is backed up by what Welsh Government have said in respect of their assessment of this proposal, because if they did feel it was premature, there was a very good chance they would have called this application in, and they haven't done so. So that's my response to prematurity. Housing land supply was mentioned in the housing land supply trajectory paper. It is a clear fact that if this application were not to be approved, then it is likely, as we head towards the hearing and go through the hearings, the council will be in a very difficult position in respect of housing land supply. It would not achieve the required 5 years. As members, you are aware that for a plan to be sound, not only do all the other issues have to be considered, including sustainability and everything else, but one of the issues that's key is that we have a demonstrable 5-year housing land supply at the time the plan is adopted. So this is one of the reasons why we are arguing against deferring applications and arguing refusal on grounds of prematurity, because that will have a harmful effect on getting the LDP adopted by the Welsh Government and by the inspector. I was going to talk, obviously the Rainscape issue has been dealt with. It is not an agreed scheme. It is one of a number of suggestions that have been made by the developers. We have no agreed overall drainage scheme as yet. There is a drainage strategy, but not a detailed scheme. That is dealt with by condition, bear with me, I think it's 26 of the proposed consent, which requires a scheme to be submitted. That may be part of that may be a Rainscape strategy, part of it may not, but that will be the case that will form part of any submission under that condition. That is not unusual. Members will recall the discussions we had around Colwinston, where we actually had a detailed scheme in that case, where we asked for details of drainage to be submitted. So it's not unusual. The previous decision in 2003 was mentioned, and that is an interesting consideration for members, because in that case, that was an application that was submitted prior to the unitary development plan being adopted. So it was, if you like, almost a similar situation to we are now, except that the Darren Farm site was not an allocated site. It had gone through the process as part of the unitary development plan and had not been allocated. So while this has gone through the process and it is an allocated site, in that particular case it hadn't been. We are talking about it's a different scheme. It was a smaller scheme, but it was a different scheme. It dates back to 2003, with the decisions being taken on the unitary development plan actually dating back to the late 90s. So it is a long time ago, unfortunately, and as we all know in the planning system, nothing is ever forever when it comes to planning. We are constantly having to re-look at our decisions. In this case, we've had to do it in respect of housing land supply. So that is why that decision is still relevant, in as much as it shows how the change in situation has affected it. And finally, one other issue we raised was landscape value, and it is relevant to note members who were on the site visit today will have a good view of the site. It is obviously an open greenfield site currently. There is no doubt that the development will change that, but I think members will agree, certainly your officers are of the opinion, and professional advisors are of the opinion, the way the site is proposed to be developed will ensure that the character is at least attempted to be protected in respect of there is a large green buffer at the far end of the site on the opposite side of the road, and the site has been parcelled up, so there are large green areas remaining within the site, and we would like to see that come forward in any detailed submissions. And you will note there is a phasing condition on this consent, which recognises that the site is likely to come forward in various phases as the development progresses. But we would like to see clearly the provision of these green areas within the site, which will retain some of the rural character.
Okay, I'll throw it open to members then. Local members first, I think. Andrew Parker.
Chairman, you've heard the objections and concerns regarding this scheme from Councillor David Morgan speaking on behalf of Cowbridge Council, and Councillor Geoffrey Cox, my fellow ward member for Cowbridge. They have adequately covered the concerns raised by the residents of Cowbridge. I intend to propose that a decision in respect of this application be deferred. The application is in respect of a detailed permission for construction of a link road connecting Cowbridge Bypass with Glantwit Major, with an outline permission for all matters reserved, and these are covered in the recommendations, which are embraced in some 37 conditions. which to my memory is the largest number of conditions ever imposed on a scheme. Tonight, if this permission is approved, all we would be doing is confirming the link road. I cannot therefore see the urgency of approving this scheme, bearing in mind the considerable details that would have to be approved to satisfy the 37 planning conditions. My other concern is that should the committee determine this application tonight, we will be accepting an increase in numbers identified in the emerging LDP from 390 on 17 hectares to 475 on 27 hectares, which now form part of the Council's focus changes to the LDP. This increase of 10 hectares represents an increase of 60% over the LDP. As members may be aware, the Darren Farm allocation will be discussed at the LDP examination hearings, where each of the proposed housing allocations will be discussed over a number of days early in March. The Darren Farm application will be one of the ones discussed on the session hearing, sessions 8 housing allocations on the 2nd of March 2016. There will be other sessions prior to this on the 19th and 20th of January, where the general issue regarding housing provision will be discussed. And of course, the specific and direct discussions in respect of this application will be heard on the 2nd of March. I would remind you that the next planning committee after that date will be on the 10th of March, or failing that, the next one will be on the 14th of April. The officer's report, which extends to over 100 pages, has only been available this week, and I'm sure we would all agree that this cannot be a long enough period to digest fully this application. Therefore, a deferment would not be an unreasonable request. I would remind you that Councillor Gwyn Roberts on the 19th of November proposed a similar deferment to allow for further consideration of a scheme for 13 affordable houses. And I recognise the difference between this scheme and the Pentre-Myrick scheme. But this was accepted unanimously by the committee. By offering this decision to allow for further consideration of, in particular, the major concerns regarding surface water and foul drainage would not be an unreasonable delay. Welsh Water themselves accept that the sewage network system will not be scheduled for completion before the 31st of March 2018, some 2 years hence. I am aware that the developer has undertaken a hydrological modelling assessment, but the full implications of this cannot be understood by the committee tonight. Similarly, the Link Road surface water drainage, which I assume will also include all other surface water drainage from the proposed site, will be served by swales, which basically are large ponds, which in theory collect the surface water and allow it to drain through geological substructure under the site. There is, in my opinion, no proof at this stage that this will work, for let alone the 1 in 100 design criteria, and plus the 30% for the 1 in 1,000-year criteria. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, this is clearly shown on the photograph in the Cowbridge Gem of the 7th, when the graveyard of the church was submerged. The applicant's Messrs Commercial Escape Group and Mr Johnny Humphrey are the enabling developers and would not as such carry out the development themselves, which will probably be carried out by national house builders. At outline stage, these details remain to be determined, and therefore I believe a deferment to allow for the inspector to consider all these matters relevant to this application would not be an unreasonable request. I have many other concerns, but would leave these for further discussions. I would ask, therefore, for the support of my fellow councillors to approve my request for a deferment, and as such respect the views and concerns of the residents of Cowbridge, who therefore will have the opportunity to address the inspector on the 2nd of March. I believe I have put forward a compelling case for deferment and hope that you will support this proposal.
Thank you. Have you a seconder? Yeah, seconder. Anybody want else to say on the deferment? Because I think I'm going to... yes, Councillor Gwyn Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I feel I need to respond because my name's been taken away twice now. The fact is, I did propose that the Pentre-Myrick was postponed. It was not because of prematurity. In actual fact, other members may recall that what happened, we were due to have to refuse that application because the arrangements for pedestrians on the busy road was unsatisfactory. What happened, the developers had failed to reach agreement with our highways officers, So the delay was made simply for them to reach agreement as an alternative to delaying it. It's nothing to do with prematurity. I think this committee already knows it's perfectly feasible to defer applications. That's quite well established before. But the reasons for doing it are completely false there. The reason were specific in order to avoid refusing it.
Okay, Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to go back to the 2003 decision. Why the difference from red to green was the question posed by one of the objectors. But as Marcus referred, the context has changed. The strategy back then was in the UDP was to concentrate housing development in the stretch from Roos to Dinas Powys, and therefore not to put much housing at all in the rural Vale. The LDP proposed strategy is to recognise that actually, do you know what? People don't just want to live in Barry or Roos or Dinas Powys, they want to live in other areas as well. And their children and their relatives and people coming in can't access housing because it's very expensive and not enough is being built in the rural Vale. And so the strategic difference is that housing is needed in the rural Vale, and the other major difference from that previous decision is the recognition that in the rural Vale it is inevitable that the sites are going to be greenfield sites, whereas in Barry and areas in the southeast of the Vale there may well be brownfield sites, and in fact I think almost all of the housing in Barry has been on brownfield sites, and that's one of the reasons for objecting to the Waycock Cross applications, is that they are an anomaly in that they were seeking to build houses on greenfield sites when actually we were able to meet the need and the demand on brownfield sites. So a very different context and strategy to explain why the shift from a refusal to an approval. And the other comment I wanted to make is about the concern with it, the lack of detail. Inevitably, we're very used to having outline planning applications, and you can't invest a great deal of money in detailed planning of the layout and detailed works on the engineering and the drainage if actually at the end of the day you're not sure whether in principle that money is going to be lost because it will be refused. That's the way the planning system works. Get an outline approval, you know what you're working with, and then you can invest and spend the money to do the detailed work. So although that's difficult to accept for people, residents who've got concerns, it is very much the way things work, and the 37 conditions should be regarded not so much as a problem of lack of detail, but of a very detailed concern with all of these issues and a determination to control them properly as the scheme develops.
Thank you for that. Marcus, you've heard from one or two people. Do you want to add anything?
I was only going to draw a couple of issues out of it. I was going to refer to the waterfront site actually, just to point out that there was, I think, 70 odd conditions on the waterfront site because of the amount of development, and also because of the remediation works and drainage works that were necessary there. There were a huge number of conditions. Members may also remember the St Athan developed the Defence Training College scheme, and I think that was well in excess of 70 conditions. It might even have been getting close to 100 conditions on that. So it isn't unusual to have, for example, 37 conditions on a housing scheme, especially an outline application, and especially an application like this, which is a hybrid application where you do have a detailed element, which is the road, which needs specific conditioning, and then obviously the general conditions which deal with things such as the submission later on of drainage details. So it isn't unusual. I just wanted to stress that fact. I also wanted to point out 475 houses is the maximum they're applying for. Obviously, we don't know what it will ultimately end up at, but there was a discussion was mentioned on the site visit about what is the norm of these situations, and it is quite common for it to be less than, once the development is designed in full, that it could well be less than 475. It couldn't be any more, but it could well be less than 475, dependent on how the designs go. and obviously, as we've gone over this in a lot of detail, but just to reiterate, drainage would still be subject to discharge by condition. It is not agreed as part of this scheme. And that would include the road as well, because I know Councillor Parker was concerned about the issue of swales and other issues. If you notice in the condition package, the conditions are split between detailed application, outline application, and then both sets of proposals. And the drainage condition is for both sets of proposals. So the drainage is not set for the road even. It will be subject to further detailed submission.
Okay. Councillor Bronwyn Brooks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, we've heard a lot of the word deferment tonight with various applications and various guises and forms. But I think there's a word that we need to use with this application about sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I mean around affordable housing and rural housing in the Vale of Glamorgan. There's been a clear need for this for many years. And in fact, the previous LDP actually received open criticism from Welsh Government is that there wasn't enough development in areas, particularly around Cowbridge, where you've got sustainability there, to keep the high street open, to keep businesses open. I was at Christmas time, I was down in Cowbridge myself doing a bit of shopping, and I was actually quite shocked actually to see the number of shops that are there, or a few shops there that have been there for many years, are actually closing. It's only by developing towns such as Cowbridge, and there's been development there over the years, and I think a development such as this, which I think if you look at the sort of the grand sort of picture, fits in with the town and the foot mark of that, and I think it's absolutely crucial that we see up to 40% affordable housing, which will help keep young people there, older people who are retiring who want to downsize, to actually keep the communities vibrant and alive. You've got a school there, you've got a mix of parks and play areas and green areas, and I think, you know, even though this is just the outline, I think this is a much needed development in an area that can actually easily accommodate it.
Thank you. I think I know Anthony wants to come in, but I think the general debate about the pros and cons of it, I can leave second. I'd like to get this deferment out of the way with first to see where we are going with it, because otherwise, if we are going to defer it, we're going to defer it. So, did you want to speak on the deferment? Yeah.
Chairman, I just wanted a clarification because obviously the reason for deferment is to allow discussion and debate with the inspectors, the process of the inquiry. If this application were to be approved tonight, I'm not preempting anything, but I'm trying to get a handle on this. If it's deferred, it's guaranteed to be discussed. If it's approved, will it still be discussed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it will. All sites, even whether they have consent or not, and if they're allocated sites in the local development plan, will go through a process, the same process as identified, and it's still open for the inspector actually to decide they may not be suitable.
Yeah, a bit late in Wenvo, Marcus, yeah. Okay, anything else on the deferment? Now, Councillor Jeff James has made that comment. So it's been moved and seconded for a deferment. Those in favour of a deferment, please show. Eight. Those against the deferment? No. There's 11. So we're not going to defer it. We're going to debate it, and it now's the opportunity to debate and bring all these points out that people want clarification on or speak about. I know that Councillor Anthony Powell has indicated, so I'm going to kick off with him first, and then I'll come to Jonathan Bird.
Chair, I was actually going to ask a question on deferment, but Councillor James came in and basically had the clarification I was seeking, so I have nothing further to add.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a request really that if, as I suspect, this may get approved tonight, could I request that the conditions do come back to committee? Because this is a very large development and quite a lot of complex conditions, and I think some of these conditions we would like to see back at committee rather than be delegated.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Can you come back on that, please, Marcus?
I'm sure members wouldn't want to see all the conditions come back to committee. Could I mean, perhaps if the vote is held and then maybe it could be identified. I mean, we're quite happy to submit some. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I mean, quite clearly we've got a lot of detailed applications coming forward if this is approved, and we will have detailed applications from maybe 3 or 4 developers. At that moment in time, I assume that a lot of these conditions will have to be embraced within the context of those detailed planning applications, or would things like the drainage have to be resolved before the detailed applications came in from the enabling developers?
There is a phasing scheme which has to come in on this. There are a number of other conditions, but it is likely that the drainage scheme will be dealt with as a standalone holistic scheme to deal with everything before phasing is even dealt with, because there is a risk that if you deal with drainage on a phased basis, you could end up with a site which can't be developed because it doesn't work. So if drainage is your main concern, I'm quite happy that that condition come back. I'm not sure, would you be wanting to see, for example, a phasing scheme coming back to you, or so I'm quite happy that we can bring, because drainage appears to be one of the main areas of concern, I suggest that probably is the one you want to come back to you when it is submitted, and that is condition 26 on the applications, and I think that's probably the one that you want to come back.
That certainly is one of the major ones, but design and layout as well, maybe?
You will anyway, because they're reserve matters. So I mean, obviously when they come in, reserve matters technically are delegated, but I would imagine with this scheme and obviously the nature of it, we would ensure that they all come back to planning committee.
Okay. Okay. Any other member want any clarification? Councillor French.
We've been told that this site will be discussed at the inquiry. Let us have a scenario where tonight it's approved and the inspector says it's not satisfactory and he recommends non-approval or for it to be withdrawn. What happens to the granted planning permission?
Yeah. Simple, isn't it?
It's not a straightforward answer. If the consent has been issued, we have to remember this is subject to a legal agreement, and there will be detailed discussions about that regarding that legal agreement, which will go on, and it's not beyond the bounds that could actually go beyond when any decision of the inspector is issued. So you might not actually have a decision, even though the committee resolved to approve it. You may not have a decision. In that particular case, it is quite likely that the council would be within its rights to turn around and make a different decision. However, if the decision has been issued, that consent lasts for 5 years.
Okay. Any other member want to raise anything? Otherwise, I'll go to a vote.
Can I very quickly just point out 2 or 3 issues which I wanted to make clear? We haven't actually dealt with what the scheme itself will deliver through section 106. So we have talked about the 40% affordable housing, but I just wanted to point that out for members, just so they were clear. It is £4,131,000 or almost £132,000 for education provision, which is a combination of nursery, primary, secondary, and Welsh medium education. It is the delivery of a 2-hectare primary school site for no cost to the council. Almost £1 million in sustainable transport contributions, £950,000 in sustainable transport contributions, £200,000 for community facilities, and £30,000 for public art. So it is not insubstantial what the developers are agreeing to contribute to ameliorate their development as they go forward.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, straight on. Thank you. I've had a mover. Seconder? Thank you. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. (11). Thank you. Those against? 8. Yes, you've lost one along the way, unfortunately. Okay, then that's clearly carried. Thank you for that. Thanks for the debate. Moving swiftly on. When I can find my new agenda. We got your agenda there. Let's have a look. Okay, on page 224's Court Farm, Bombleston, which you all know. Sorry, I've got Home Farm Land Western Road, which is another solar farm application, which is a number that we've had here in the Vale. Marcus, would you like to lead us through it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a 3 megawatt ground-mounted solar array. It is it's not small, but it's relatively small considering some of the applications we've had before us in the past. It is a total of 11,520 modules to an approximate height of 2 metres and a depth of 1.78 metres, and they'll be set at 20-degree angles. We are all now, I'm sure, as committee members, fully aware of what these things look like. This application, just for information, is interesting in one respect, in that the developers agreed to submit an environmental impact assessment with it, primarily because of some concerns about historic buildings in the vicinity and also a site of nature conservation. But that has supported the development and not led to any concerns. So I will now...
Okay, I think there's a speaker for it. Yes. You're Mr. Colleen Virtue? Oh, right. Right, okay then. If you'd like to come forward, I think you've got 3 minutes. Yeah, haven't you? Have you done some sort of swap?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you inform the local authority?
I've spoken to the clerk when I came in.
No.
We haven't informed the authority.
Yeah, I don't think it's legal for you to do that. Once you have to notify the authority, the speaker, before you're registered to speak. I'll just take legal advice just before I kick you out that chair. Yeah. We're just going to get some legal advice on it.
Okay.
We've never had that before. Normally we're advised who's going to speak to the committee. Yeah, Councillor Drysdale has asked me if he can ask the officer in the meantime for a point of clarification, so please do.
Thank you. Within the report, there's discussion about concerns expressed about the underground cable where it comes out near St George's Village, and I just wanted to know what is going to be at the end of that cable that could possibly be an eyesore or objectionable or affect the outlook of the historic building close by.
Usually it's just a connection to the grid. It's not. We wouldn't expect a transformer or any of the other buildings which are proposed as part of this. There will be transformer buildings, but the plans don't indicate that. They are on here. There is a compound shown. I don't know if it shows it in more detail on that plan. That is just the compound to pull in. So we wouldn't normally expect that cable to involve a large amount of development which would lead to a negative effect on the village. No.
Okay, has that been clarified to your satisfaction? Okay, I'm just waiting for that legal response and then I'll be back to you. It's what I thought. You haven't advised the council, so you won't be allowed to speak. You were speaking in favour of it, were you? There's nobody going to speak against it, unless any member in here is going to object to it. But I would sense from the members that it would go through, but we'll wait and see. I'm going to ask any member if they want... well, I'll ask you... put the report to the committee, so I'll ask any member if they want to speak on it. Councillor Bird.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Second. I feared that that might be the case. So, with that being said, those members in favour of the application, please show. That is unanimously carried, and...
Sorry, he's been sitting there.
yeah, he's been sitting there all that time.
And we're very sorry.
And if he'd have come and told the chairman, I would have told him, go home. Yes, I think that could be the case. Okay, Court Farm Bombleston 224 has gone, and we've dealt with the last application on there. So members are now free. I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you for your indulgence.